Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I am Joe. With me is Greg. As always, to talk about college basketball, Greg, we had the first weekend of the NCAA tournament, the greatest weekend of all weekends, and in the uh, actual calendar, we have a lot to talk about with recapping that. We have coaching changes, and we have some Sweet 16 and Elite 8 matchups to look forward. First of all, though, Greg, how are you doing?
Great. Maybe not as much excitement as we could possibly ask for in an opening weekend, but I think we are in for some real dynamite. Joe, I was saying after the first day, first 2 days, I said, hey, I think we're in for an electric round two, and we got a little bit more excitement in round two. Got our first buzzer beater and whatnot, but I think with how chalky it's been, we can expect some fairly intense matchups in the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight.
Yeah, this is always going to be a tournament that was about the second round and beyond, just the way that the sport has been this year. I don't know if it warrants a larger discussion about the transfer portal and everything else, because there's always been some sort of upward mobility in sports. But if it does continue to happen where, Greg, we don't have Cinderella's moving on to the next round, or if we have a lot of chalk, maybe for one more year, that's something we'll talk about. So, definitely something to consider this offseason. But we also have a lot to get to, Greg. We have a lot of brackets busted, but we also have coaches taking new jobs. So while we can complain about the transfer portal and players leaving, we're having coaches jump ship just like ever. I guess just as bad as ever. So let's start with some of the more recent news, Greg, since it is more near and dear to us. It is being reported widely. It's not official yet. I guess the Xavier athletics department has made it official, but Texas has not. Sean Miller is leaving Xavier to go coach at Texas. Now, there is some, I would say, fishiness with this, Greg, where there was maybe he agreed to it after the Texas game, before the Illinois game started, which we're seeing more and more coaches do that. And then Xavier comes out and looks pretty unprepared against Illinois as well. So there's some people who are upset about Sean Miller. Ultimately, though, this is about going to a place where he has a chance to win, even if it is leaving a school that is giving him two big shots to have a chance as a head coach, whether it was to start his career and then when a lot of other schools wouldn't hire him after the whole FBI stuff at Arizona.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of sit on this as, you know, this was in my mind pretty easily foreseeable. He's not an alum. Like, yes, he has a previous connection, and yes, we certainly gave him a chance when not a lot of other people would. But don't act like he didn't do anything for the school, even in his second stint around. Sweet 16 and a tournament win and whatnot. And I mean, do you want to talk about, or since it's only a rumor, do you want to talk about where we're looking next, or I just don't know if you want to.
Up to you, wherever you want to go with this.
My thing is if they hire Mac, which is out in the atmosphere right now. If it's Chris Mack and they bring him in, my thought is he's more likely to stay. I would, if they bring him in and they keep him, I would think he's in it for the long haul. Now the long haul is really going to depend on how well it goes the second time, and it feels like we're just gonna hit repeat and stuff. But anyway, I don't know. I saw a lot of negativity, on social media and whatnot. I get some of it, but I'm not. I feel like when he left for Arizona, I was heartbroken. I was peeved. But like, to be honest with you, and you can tell me if you think I'm wrong, but like, I feel like the program, yes, was built by him in a way, but it was built by also the people before him. But it reached its highest highs with Chris Mack. I mean, like, consistent high. It's one seed with Chris Mack. I mean, if we go on the same flight path, I mean,
Yeah.
Sean Miller built it more. Like, there's no question about that. There's no Chris Mack without Sean Miller. But if we end up on the same path and we get higher than we were before,
And there's no Sean Miller without that motto. Don't forget that first tournament run as well. So
Correct.
this is more about a program and a university that is invested into the basketball program. It is one of the nicest on-court arenas, especially given where they were at their point in history, in the A10 and everything. So they've definitely upgraded facilities. They have really nice facilities. So there is a good point that Chris Mack was the height. We were getting number one seeds in the tournament. I say that as an alum, even though I am a UK fan, and I say we for UK as well. I disagree with you about the fact that he would stay here, though, because he took the first big job out. There were some other offers and here and there, but like Louisville offered him. The rumor is his wife told him she wanted to go back to Louisville. He jumped right on that bandwagon. He took that job when it was not a desired job. There was all the stuff from Rick Pitino, all the mess that was left, and he gets there and he actually makes the tournament first year. And then after that, everything falls apart. There's an extortion case with Dino Gaudio. But then he gets fired probably too early. Then they go to Kenny Payne, and Kenny Payne was a disaster. So if you're telling me this is a guy who, yes, he is an alum, there's less of a chance he leaves than Sean Miller. But when you say the current state of college basketball, he took an extraordinary leap to go take the Louisville job, which was in a terrible spot. So why wouldn't he do the same thing again for a better spot if he gets an opportunity, especially given, it seems like Sean Miller left this job with maybe some friction with the administration at the school, maybe with some frustration about the NIL situation at Xavier, even though I think they've done well in the portal, Greg. Davion McKnight, very good player for them. Ryan Conwell was very wanted by a lot of universities. So I don't know. I would say Chris Mack is probably going to be the hire. It's going to be a good one. I would not trust him to stay long term just because of those facts of like, if he's going to take that Louisville job, well, who's to say he wouldn't take another job? There is the family part of it too, but that's where I'm at with it. I don't blame Sean Miller a ton. I saw this maybe coming after the first year he was getting some job offers, and reportedly Texas was interested before Rodney Terry went on that tournament run. But it is kind of disloyal for the team that did give you your second chance, and then you're, maybe like doing the all in stuff and doing the Sean Miller podcast and doing all these other things where it really did seem like he was going to buy in and this is where he's going to finish his career. It kind of stinks. And then I think he could have gotten to new heights if he didn't have some injuries. But also, I get the frustrations he could have at the front office, and he came back and maybe expected something different 3 years ago to where the sport now, Greg, is just completely different. I mean, this is about the transfer portal, it's about NIL money, and he has a chance to make a Final Four at Texas. And to be honest, he may not have that chance if the things keep on trending this way for the Big East, for these private schools. We talked about the Big East not having as many teams in the tournament the last couple of years, and then this year, a couple of them got round one wins, and a lot of them didn't get wins after that. So expect Chris Mack to be the hire, but I think this is more of a statement of, you know, hey, you better get some NIL funds together. If you're the president at Xavier, adding a medical school is great, but the reason why you have all those nice buildings is because of the basketball team. That's why you have all those nice new buildings. Greg, you referenced at one point your sister went to Xavier and she paid like the same price as Cincinnati, and then we go to Xavier and the price is jacked up by $20,000 every UC, and I don't
And
even want to.
it's like another 10, 15,000 more than it was when we graduated 10 years ago.
Uh-huh. And it's a lot of it's the basketball getting in the Big East. Even with those tough times, they have more visibility. So adding a medical school is really great, but you have to know that the reason where you are is the basketball team. So we have all those conversations. Oh, Nick Saban gets paid too much at Alabama. He funded a lot of stuff at Alabama where a lot of out-of-state students applied. So a lot to consider there. Don't have to get all into it. Don't have to do a full podcast on the Xavier job, but it is more near and dear to our hearts. And yes, it'll be important to get that NIL money going. So obviously, Centos is a big donor for Xavier and Centos Center. They'll have to kind of hit up their pockets. They'll kind of have to hit up a lot of other alumni pockets that, all these other public schools have a wider base to draw from. Xavier, private school, you have some big donors. You have to hit those hard and try to get someone who can stay and can win here and feel like they can win here. And maybe it's Chris Mack. Maybe he's loyal this time. And you're right, there was some heights there. He's a very good X's and O's coach, Greg. Very good offensive X's and O's, specifically out of bounds plays. He does a really good job on. So I'd be excited to see him back, although I don't trust that he wouldn't leave either. All right, we have a couple more jobs to get to, Greg. Let's start it off with the other team that feels betrayed, and that is West Virginia. Darian DeVries goes to Indiana. West Virginia feels slighted by this because they think there's contact between him and the school. when they were at their MTE earlier this season. I think it was the Atlantis, right? And they think that he took the job then. There's rumors that he shut his son down for the rest of the season, Tucker, because he wanted him to be eligible next year for Indiana. So there's a lot of like they feel bad. They've had four head coaches in the last 3 seasons now because of the whole Bob Huggins thing. So West Virginia feels upset. Indiana gets a coach that I think is probably about as best as they can expect, given that Dusty May wasn't going to leave Michigan. Honestly give it an A higher for Indiana. It just sucks for West Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that stuff's inevitable. I mean, how many examples do we need before it's like, hey, is that really a coincidence? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Sean Miller stuff is a little bit different because obviously his hat was kind of in the ring the last time that job opened up, but they are literally in the same building, one night, and then a few nights later he's the coach. I mean, come on. Same thing now, though. That's a little bit of a longer distance, from in terms of time frame, November to March. But still, I mean, you can't tell me that in today's atmosphere that coaches don't talk, players don't talk, administrate like. And honestly, a lot of this stuff was probably happening before. I think the bigger question that maybe you're not necessarily hinting at, but I think what it leads to is like, do they need to have these kind of like anti-tampering kind of things that like the NBA and other sports have? Is that going to become when we get into these, which we know are coming, when we get into these NIL regulations, is that going to be some of the stuff that goes into, especially, I mean, if these guys are signing contracts, I have to think that's going to be part of it, and although coaches have been signing contracts for forever, so I've never read through a contract for a coach, front to back. I've never seen one. So I would have to think there's some of that stuff in there. And this could be West Virginia, trying to get some money back. Maybe, obviously NIL funds are NIL funds. And if they're able to say, hey, he was tampered with and that something's in our, contract, maybe they can get some money back. I don't know. I don't know. Without seeing the contract, I don't know. But end all be all, this stuff happens, and you got to like that's it.
It's going to keep on happening. Tampering is going to happen, and it does happen in NFL, NBA, players, coaches alike. So it'll keep on happening, and I do think collective bargaining and everything will come about with the players and with like revenue sharing, which comes next year, Greg, which could have an impact and maybe can fix some of these issues we're seeing with some of the mid majors not going far in the tournament. But yeah, it's going to keep on happening. It stinks for West Virginia. They do have, I would say, a pretty good program, and they can get another good head coach in there very very soon. We will see who that might be. But since we talked about Indiana hiring a head coach, Greg, let's stay with some of the Big Ten hires real quick. We have Iowa hiring Ben McCollum off of his win in the NCAA tournament at Drake. Now, I've made the joke, Greg. Iowa football offense is kind of a sleeper. Iowa basketball offense is about to be a sleeper. We saw some really good offensive production from guys over the last couple of years, like Luka Garza at Iowa. It's going to be a long, slow pace, long game for them if you're a fan of Iowa in the future. Some good players. Bennett Sturt's very good player. Probably going to follow him to Iowa. But I like this hire as well. He's worked his way up from D2 and then to Drake for 1 year and now to Iowa. And I don't necessarily agree with Fran McCaffrey being fired, but I think the hire was a very good hire in light of the fact that the job was open.
Yeah, for anybody who's counting, 364th in pace, that is last. If my numbers are still correct, and no one's moved up in the last couple of weeks. Not how the sport works. That's a tongue-in-cheek joke. I mean, what a story for this guy. Coaching D2, was it Northwest Missouri State, I think. It won several national titles and then ends up at, Drake, and now is the head coach at Iowa. I mean, he's from the area, so, that's, he's got a big association with the area. Thought maybe with how fast he's risen, like his name might be in the hat for some bigger jobs, but it seems like this is the job he wanted, and it's the job he gets.
I think that was the job he wanted as well, so it's good for him to get that one. I think we're going to have a lot of good head coach. Like, there's not. I mean, there is starting to be more job openings in the Power Five, I would say, but there wasn't as many as there could have been. I think that there's going to be a lot of good coaching jobs this next season. I think there's going to be, I could say there's going to be a lot of good coaches at these jobs next season. I don't know if we'll have a lot of firings next year because of that. I mean, talking about the SEC getting so many teams in the tournament and the Big Ten doing so well in the tournament, that makes it easier. But I do think it's a good hire for Iowa. The other Big Ten coaching news, Greg, Nico Medved out of Colorado State. You got a tournament win and nearly got the team to the Sweet 16 if it wasn't for a Derek Queen buzzer beater that we'll talk about here shortly. He is going to Minnesota. Now, this is another one that just makes sense. He's from the area like Ben McCollum. I think it's another solid hire. You just never know with some of these lower tiered teams in like the Big Ten, though, if it's going to work out. I thought Ben Johnson could have worked out for them as well. So it's going to take more than just a head coach at some of these universities. It's going to take a whole program that buys in. And I think he could get the buy in that needed to do the job because he is a Minnesota man.
Yeah, I think he spent 7 years at Colorado State. Obviously, that league has, been in the, sixth to eighth best league, give or take. So it's been competitive. They put, I think, 6 teams in the tournament last year, and help me, Joe, 4 this year: San Diego State, Colorado State. Did I have that right? Is it 4-3?
Utah State, New Mexico.
Okay, yeah. So it is 4. It's one of those things where this is the guy you hire, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. I was kind of thinking of, I don't want to do a tangent. We got to talk about the actual tournament, but like Richard Pitino now, obviously he's got connections to the Minnesota job. That's, kind of what led me to think it's like, is he going to get, another shot? I don't know if it'll be this coaching cycle. Just looking at the coaching seems to be doing similar things to what the players are. It's kind of condensing into these big, like I was thinking after obviously Sean Miller signs with, Texas, is like, is this one of the best crop of like coaching talent that's ever been in one conference? Like, think about the narrative we've been talking about. Hey man, there's lots of openings, but there's not a lot of mid-major coaches, because all the good coaching is already in the power conference right now. Not to say that somebody's star can't rise and somebody can't be the next whoever. Obviously, at some point, these coaching legends are going to retire, as the ACC went through. But back to this particular job, Minnesota's been here and there over the last decade. They've been good at times, and others. So it's just going to depend on sometimes if the right thing breaks your way, players staying healthy, NIL, and if the school is going to commit to, like, we could talk about all of these jobs, but like at the end, is the school going to commit to basketball? It's really honestly the only question you need to ask yourself.
Absolutely. A lot of good coaches have not worked out at different places, and it's not always the coach's fault. A lot of times, administration. One quick note, Greg, about a coach, just because of that point. Tobin Anderson was fired at Iona. He's the guy who a couple of years ago got the 16 seed win over the 1 over Purdue. They already out at Iona. He made the conference tournament final and they lost, and he is out. So there's a lot of like management things that we don't know what's going on. That guy should have a job still in Iona. SEC only coaching change was that Sean Miller so far. We'll see if anything else opens up as Kentucky opened up late last year. Like more things can happen even after this week. But Greg, there's only 2 more coaching things we have to get to. We'll start it off with the next one as being Will Wade takes the NC State job. Now, he was pretty upfront and honest about this because he said, hey, I have interviewed with NC State. I have talked to them. And I have been honest with my players. But coming from another, like a lower major job, I think that gave him the clearance to be honest. Be like, hey, you guys want to go Power Five. I want to go Power Five next year. We're still focused on winning in the NCAA tournament. And they did win a game in the NCAA tournament, but it was very much, hey, I'm allowed to be honest, and this is the best policy because now I don't have players wondering about what's going to happen later. But this is just now we can focus on the ball. And they did get a big win, and they outplayed Clemson pretty thoroughly too. But now he gets to go to NC State. He's wanted that big conference job again ever since getting fired from LSU. A lot of the things he did to get fired from LSU are now legal. So there is a lot of hope for NC State to be a good team in the future and also to help bring the ACC back a little bit.
Yeah, I think being open and honest about it allows him to sit in that locker room and be like, "Look, guys, you want to come with me next year? Prove it here." Like instead of the player, if you keep that, that is he here or gone? Maybe the player is kind of mentally checked out. But I mean, if you're just honest with them, look, guys, man, like I'm telling you, this is what's going to happen. You know, they know what the stakes are. Like not just winning a tournament game, but some of them will be looking at next year, and obviously some of them exhausted eligibility, but some of those guys, and he brought in, some guys that had, you know, already had stops at major conference places. So it's not like that. We talked about that team in the preseason because we thought they were going to win their conference and possibly win a game in the NCAA tournament, and here we are. This has been coming. We've been talking about Will Wade. When is he going to get a job for some time now? It's NC State. The ACC is a mess right now with everything they got going on, at least in terms of basketball. Joe, we don't need to get into what's going on because of all the football stuff with all the Florida State, Clemson stuff. But, I mean, the guy can coach ball. He can recruit. We know that. So we'll see.
Yeah, I
It
don't
feels
know.
like that's what I'm saying about a lot of these coaches, but like, I don't know that I have a surefire opinion of like it's going to work out. It's not going to work out with any of these guys that just got hired. I feel
Yeah.
strongly that Ben McCollum because of how, I mean, he's had success everywhere he's been. I feel like it's going to work out for him. And I think Will Wade obviously only got fired because of other things. I feel like it's going to work out for him. Could be wrong, but those are the two that of this like cycle that I feel like it's going to work out for.
I kind of think that there's a lot of B hires in here. There's not like an A plus. Like Will Wade, the whole game has changed. Yes, he got a win in the NCAA tournament. To be honest, that looked like Clemson choked it away. They were playing awful. Credit to them to get the win, but like I Xavier getting Sean Miller, like or excuse me, Texas getting Sean Miller. There's people out there, Greg. We talked about it. Top 10 job. They just got a new arena and like facilities. There's some other people who would say, hey, they're a football school. There's no way they can be a top 10 job. But when you kind of think about it, maybe they are. Is that a great hire? He's never been to the Final Four. A couple, he had the issues at Arizona with the FBI, comes back to Xavier, gets to Sweet 16, and that's great. But is that an A hire? Probably not. Like, I think there's a lot of B plus hires where we don't know what's going to happen. I have the most faith in Will Wade to get more out of the new job that he has than anyone. I do like the Darian DeVries hire. I like the Nico Medved hire. I like the Ben McCollum hire. But there hasn't been a shockingly bad hire, I would say, and there hasn't necessarily been A plus hire either. And I think that's what's kind of like it's all in the middle, and we'll see what happens. But that's why it comes into how much NIL budget do you have? Can you help these guys get better as coaches by getting them better players? That's going to be interesting to see down the stretch here. Greg, there is one more coaching change that we have left, unless I'm missing someone. I know you know who the last one is because we talked about it earlier. I don't think there is anyone going down the list that we haven't talked about already. So I'm gonna hop into it, and if I miss someone, you can correct me after. We have time is a flat circle. We have the man who upset Virginia in the first round of the NCAA tournament, going back and taking the Virginia job. Brian Odom, the VCU head coach, gets the Virginia job. Now, we talked about Tony Bennett retired right before the year, kind of a scumbag move. Some people have said. Um, Ron Sanchez is the interim coach for this year. He's let go, and they hire Ryan Odom. Ryan Odom had been at UMBC. Then he takes the Utah State job, and then he goes back home to VCU. It seemed like he was maybe like, hey, I don't really like being out in the mountains. I want to be over towards the East Coast because there's an argument Utah State is a better job than VCU, and I would say it is a better job than VCU, to be honest. And then he goes back to VCU, A10. He knows the area. He's from, he likes Virginia and everything. Now he gets the Virginia job. Going to have to change a lot of things with how Tony Bennett did things, and there's already McNeely's already in the portal, their best player from this year. So, Greg, thoughts on this last hire?
I just would have loved if we had a time machine before that Virginia UMBC game, before it even tips, just to walk up to him and be like, "Hey, you're going to coach this team in 7 years or whatever." I think that's right. I think that's the number of years. I just strange. Like it's weird how we've got a lot of interconnectedness with collegiate basketball hiring right now, with guys going back to you know alma maters and second stints with schools, and some of these ones are, yeah, they're an alum, but we're hiring them off an NBA bench. But this one to me just like sticks out as we're in the middle of the month of March and nothing crazy has happened this year. And the guy who had the first of the craziest upsets of all time in NCAA history is now coaching the school that he beat. It's just, you said it, man. Time's a flat circle. Another one that it's like, I guess he's had success, everywhere he's been, but if you really look at it, like Utah State's been cycling through coaches like nobody's business, and they're still doing great. So maybe some of that is program. VCU seems like they've been pretty steady and constant, for what they are, at least in the A10. Maybe some of that is program. Obviously he beat Virginia when he was at UMBC. I bet you if they play that game 99 more times, Virginia probably wins it the other 99, but it doesn't matter. That was the one time that they beat them. So this is another one that I just don't have a strong feeling about. Again, I'll just reach back. I think Will Wade and Ben McCollum are the two that I would put my stamp on, which is meaningless and worthless. But those are the two that I do feel like will work out. I don't really have a nose for where I think this one's going to go.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the fact that George Mason won the A10 was a bad thing for a lot of coaches in terms of reputation. Like, I think VCU and Dayton and St. Joe's have the talent to win that conference. Maybe St. Louis, but also first year head coach, obviously, with shirts there. So and the fact that they let George Mason, who did have a talent, I just don't think their team was as talented as the other teams in the conference, win, I think is kind of like, maybe something's up here. But he seems more comfortable on the East Coast. But yeah, I'd say the same thing. I'd like if he would have won the A10 and maybe gone to the tournament and won a game, I'd be like, oh, there's probably a good hire here. But I mean, so far, a lot of his resume is made up of he made the tournament with Utah State, who seems like every coach who's gone there has made the tournament, and he won as a 16 seed um, over Virginia, and that's cool that he's the coach now. But I'm with you on that, Greg. That leaves. I'm going to go over this real quickly. It leaves the jobs open in the Power Five. Is Xavier, Villanova, and West Virginia right now. So a lot of things have to be decided. The transfer portal is currently open right now, as of today, Monday. So a lot of these schools are going to have to move quickly, make their moves, and then we'll have a lot more jobs opening up because of that as well. So we will see how they all fill out. We will probably recap that when we come back next week, as those will be a lot more dominoes have fallen. But Greg, let's get to the brackets. Now, I think the best way to do this and to save on time is probably to go region by region. We'll do our little recap, and then we'll also do our picks for the region, and we'll just keep on going that way. Let's start off with the South region, Greg, and Auburn and Auburn and Michigan playing in the Sweet 16. Auburn obviously beats the 16 seed. Didn't look as clean as it should have. Then they go on to play Creighton. Creighton had won their first round matchup against Louisville in Louisville. They shot the lights out of the ball. Jemiah Neal had a really good game. And then Auburn beat Creighton. Creighton did hang with them for a little bit, but then Auburn pulled away. So that is how they got here. Greg, any thoughts on how Auburn got here, how their path got to the Sweet 16?
Struggled a little bit more with Creighton than I might have thought they would. They did avoid that possible matchup of playing Louisville in Lexington, since Creighton took care of business against Louisville. I have them winning the tournament in my bracket. My bracket's doing not so bad, but I know they didn't have the shakiest result out of the one seeds, and we'll talk about some of those other one seeds coming up in a little bit. But I think I've reached the point where it's like I'm less confident that it's going to either be Duke or Auburn than I've ever been, and for about 4 weeks now.
Wow. That's how things can change in the last minute here. Greg, let's get to how Michigan has gotten to this point to play Auburn. Michigan beat UC San Diego. It was a close game. It looked like Michigan was going to win this one, and they ended up pulling away. Excuse me, it looked like they pulled away, and then UC San Diego came back and nearly won the game. Trey Donaldson hit a big three in that one. There was some questionable foul calls, and UC San Diego's best player Tate Jones did foul out with like 6 minutes to play, but they get the win 68-65. They move on to play Texas A&M. Texas A&M had ended up beating Yale and looked pretty good the whole time beating Yale, and then they go on to play Michigan, and there's a lot of jokes about Wade Taylor's inefficiency. It was the last game that he played for Texas A&M after getting his jersey in the rafters, and he was 4 of 15, and they just didn't have it. Pharrell Payne did his best in this tournament. He had two 20-point games, but couldn't get the job done, and Michigan pulled away late. It was a very good game. Vlad Golden had 23 points. Roddy Gale, who had really had his minutes limited throughout the throughout the last part of the season, Greg had 26 points out of nowhere. And Michigan gets to the Sweet 16. Very impressive. Trey Donaldson has really turned another gear, and they still have had some turnover issues in the tournament, but they're winning despite that.
Yeah, there was points in this game I thought Texas A&M might pull it off. And then Roddy Gale had a string of like 8, 9 straight point. He had that string of, I think, a 3 and a couple other buckets. And once it kind of got down to the last couple minutes, it was all right. It's done. Michigan put it to bed. Good on Wade Taylor for, I believe he didn't score in the first half. Comes with 14 second half points. Probably one of the only reasons that it, was a game for as long as it was. I had Texas A&M winning in my bracket. I have not been very confident in Michigan, but I think we did realize that they were probably underseeded because of winning the Big Ten tournament on Sunday, which hardly ever seems to matter. So they probably honestly ended up where they should have been. Probably should have been a 4 seed, and somebody else should have been knocked down. And it's unfortunate for A&M, but we know they've played really streaky at times this year. Of course, they were one of the teams that beat Auburn in the last week of the season. So they have it. They have the ability and the talent, but just couldn't put it together in this game.
They could not, and that's what sets up a very fun matchup that we're going to preview here later with some of those bigs from Michigan against, Johni Broome, possibly National Player of the Year. All right, so we'll move on to the 6th seed Ole Miss as one of these Sweet 16 teams. They were able to beat North Carolina. North Carolina made it a game late, but Ole Miss stayed in control. Pedula had 20 points in that one, and they ended up playing in the second round Iowa State. Now, Iowa State was banged up, but Greg, Ole Miss ran him out of the building. That was a phenomenal game, probably the highlight of their whole basketball program over the whole history of the program. This is maybe the best thing ever, is that they beat a 3 seed by 13 points. They advanced to the Sweet 16. Sean Pedula had 20 points, and I think there's some real juice here. They are only 3.5 point underdogs against Michigan State, who we're going to get to here in a second.
Yeah, I mean, that is going to be a gritty, grinded out game if I ever seen one. Ole Miss, Michigan State. Ole Miss, second Sweet 16 in school history. Last one, I believe, was 2001, so good for them. Props to the single Ole Miss fan that was in the bar that we were watching the game at, keeping the faith, even as North Carolina was roaring back. What was it, a 20-point lead at one point? I know it was more than 15, 16. And North Carolina started doing North Carolina things. And I even started to think, oh my goodness, they're going to win this game. I cannot believe this. And Sean Padula hit a crazy shot, a deep 3 that kind of gave him a little breathing room. And then, free throws finish out the game and whatnot. Fun game to watch. Iowa State, just rather unfortunate. We know what happens when they're not healthy. No Keyshawn Gilbert. They were able to get past Lipscomb, no problem. But Ole Miss, too much for them. That's the thing about Iowa State. We've known they play well as a team. When they're missing a piece, they just aren't the same. It doesn't seem to matter which piece it is. Aside from it being, the 11th guy off the bench, but when it's one of their key pieces this is one of those, the sum of the, parts is greater than the whole, or whatever the phrase is. Them collectively is better than their individual, their individual abilities, and some of that credit should go to TJ. But when you don't have, when you really play a good team game and you're missing a piece, beating a team that plays pretty darn good defense can get very difficult. So, I mean, Curtis Jones can only do so much, and you know, I Iowa State's been kind of back in the thick of things nationally over the last couple of years. So, I'm sure their fans are a little disappointed that with where they were at in parts of the season that it didn't turn into a little bit of a bigger run. But sometimes you just need to stay healthy, and that wasn't their thing this year.
Yeah, there's definitely some larger conversations about what the ceiling of the program is to be had, but there was an injury, and I think that is fair to say. We can have that debate if they don't go far in the tournament next year, but good for Ole Miss. Now, Greg, getting to their opponent, Michigan State, they beat Bryant. There was a moment where Bryant was ahead, and then Michigan State took over. Their matchup was against New Mexico. New Mexico had defeated Marquette. Donovan Dent put on a show, 21 points in that one. And there needs to be a conversation at some point about Shaka Smart losing to worse seeds in the NCAA tournament. He did it last year, even though they made Sweet 16. They were obviously the 7 seed. New Mexico was the 10. So that probably has to be addressed at some point as well. But New Mexico moves on. They play pretty good early, and then Michigan State's able to come back and win this one to advance to the Sweet 16. It's not a team that like you can have a ton of faith in that the offense is going to come. They have scored 71 points against New Mexico, were able to get the win. But that defense is something special, and they have set themselves up for a very good chance at making an Elite Eight at the very least.
Yeah, that Michigan State Bryant game was in question for a little bit. And then we get late in the second half and it's like, all right, it's done. It's over. It's finished. So, you know, another March, another is a Sweet 16. We're going to get a fun, for some people, if you like a certain kind of basketball, we're going to get a fun Sweet 16 matchup. There was a lot of talent on this New Mexico roster this year between Donovan Dent and um, now, for some reason, I was going to list 6 names, and I can't even get the second one out. But I thought they were going to have issues this year, and I thought the Mountain West was going to be down after, Jamal Mashburn transfers out to Temple, and JT Toppin ends up at Texas Tech. And, I just thought, oh, it's going to be a down year. So good job on Richard Pitino. And obviously, Donovan Dent having a stellar season as a freshman maybe gave them a little bit more hope for this year. Nelly Jr. Joseph. That's who I was forgetting. Their interior presence. So they I think overachieved for what I would have thought, even though Donovan Dent obviously was their centerpiece. Again, just ran into Michigan State, and there was times where I thought they might have been able to pull off that game, but Michigan State could just turn the water off for you and finish games, which is what they've done twice now this tournament so far.
All right, definitely. Greg, we have to make our picks for the East region now that we have set it up. So we have Auburn and Michigan. We have Ole Miss and Michigan State. Greg, just like we did in the opening round, pick your winners of each game and then pick your winner for the region.
I'm going to do something crazy. I'm going to pick what I have in my bracket. I have 3 of these 4 Sweet 16 teams. A common thread that you may see coming up over the next couple of regions that we discuss. I will take Auburn to beat Michigan. I will take Michigan State to beat Ole Miss. That game, again, I already said it twice, but it's going to be something. So prepare your eyes, but I think Michigan State comes out on top. And then I think Auburn just has too much to throw at Michigan State. Yes, they play great defense, and yes, they get out and transition well, but I think Auburn, they finish Michigan State, they make the Final Four, and that's where I think then I start having questions. Even though I did pick Auburn to win my title, I think whoever comes out of that bottom half is probably going to give them fits, because it's I won't we'll how about I leave that discussion for when we talk about the bottom region.
Okay, we can do that. It's very funny that you say I could see them having problems once they get to the Final Four. Like, oh, okay, fine.
But with the narrative that the Duke Auburn was for a huge chunk of the season, like if I'd have said that to you in January, hey man, I don't know. It might be tough goings once they get to the Final Four. It was Duke Auburn, Duke Auburn, Duke Auburn for the longest time. I feel like that's a departure from the narrative.
Greg, I hate to break it to you. You have to win good games, would be good teams to win the tournament. So I don't know. Like if I don't even if we had the thought, say somehow the regions got messed up and it was like Auburn had to play Houston in the Final Four, even when they were rolling, do you think that you wouldn't have some questions about like yeah maybe you have more questions than that, but like I don't know. I feel like they're not as good. I'm not as confident in them, but it is still very much like hey, you made the Final Four. Like once you're there, I feel like things can happen. So as long as you're not one of those Cinderellas, we know those don't always end up in a win. But yes, you're right. You're right that they do have more questions. I'm going to go Auburn to beat Michigan. I still think that those turnovers could come back to kill them. They've had I mean, two very close. UC San Diego nearly knocked him out. Texas A&M was with them the whole way. So I'm still not the most confident in Michigan. I'm going to go Auburn in that one. I think Pettiford has had some good games, and I think that even if everyone else is like kind of sleepwalking, he can just come off the bench, kind of help him with that jolt. And then in the other game, yeah, I have Michigan State as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Ole Miss wins it. They've shown a lot more offensive firepower than I would have expected in this tournament. But Michigan State was able to get some wins this week and some nice gritty wins. I think it's going to be the same type of game, and that experience playing those games already in the tournament is going to help. Jace Richardson didn't have the best game last game, and I think he's going to come out and maybe have a better game against Ole Miss, despite them having a better defense. So I will have Auburn versus Michigan State, and I'm going Auburn to make the Final Four. I just, Michigan State, I think can win this game against six seed, but at the same time, like I don't know how far they can go with this lack of a perimeter presence that is consistent. Jace Richardson's a freshman. He gets the chance to go up and down. That is, we don't expect him to be as consistent as other players. But like Jaden Akins, it hit or miss. Other players, Holloman's hit or miss. So because of that, I'm going to take Auburn. I think their guards, while I don't like that they don't really necessarily have a go-to guy, they're much more consistent. The only thing I think can throw that off is if maybe Chad Baker Mazara gets tossed from a game, which is very possible. Very, very possible. All right, so let's go to the East region. Greg, we're going to start off with Duke. Duke won their first round game. That doesn't need much talking about. Then we have Mississippi State and Baylor. That one was close at the end, but Baylor was able to come away with the win. And then we set up a Jeremy Roach revenge game against Duke. It was okay for a little bit, and then, and then it wasn't. Duke is much clearly better than anyone they have faced in this little pod. So they get the chance to be the first Sweet 16 representative we talk about in the East.
Yep. So we've already seen Duke Arizona once, and we're going to get to see it again. That Baylor Mississippi State game, there were Josh Hubbard hit some ridiculous shots, really kept them in the game. In the end, obviously Baylor just sheer willpower pulls it out. You're watching that Duke Baylor game and it starts to be like, oh, are we gonna get a full game? And I think some of that was the anticipation of, hey man, we still haven't kind of gotten that, those barn burners yet. We haven't gotten those high intensity moments, and this still wasn't one of them. So we did get that elsewhere, but now we get to see what we honestly thought we saw. As long as Cooper Flagg's health wasn't in question, we get to see Duke in the Sweet 16.
Greg, I do know we have to like rush to finish this a little bit, but we have something that was interesting that happened in the game, and I think we have to talk about. Mississippi State was down one with like a minute left. Did you see that they started fouling? That was the craziest thing ever.
Honestly, there's been so many games
Yeah.
I've watched. I remember somebody fouled with the game tied this weekend, but I can't remember which game it happened in.
So they only had like 3 fouls or something like that, and they started fouling with like a minute left, and like they were like, "Oh, we need to foul just because if like whatever doesn't go right, we need to start getting closer to the bonus type of thing." And then they get to the bonus, they have like 3 or 4 fouls in a possession. You just play defense, man. Like you're down by one. Even like I guess like fouling and you're down by three max, but they could foul you if they're up by three. So I was so Chris Jans might have been like I do not know what strategy that was, but that definitely cost them. in the end, but also not very bright in my estimation.
The only caveat I'll say, Joe, is there's a difference between, hey, we want to intentionally foul, and hey, ball pressure in their face. Maybe you be aggressive because we have fouls to give. Now I understand what you're saying. You're only down one. There's a shot
Hmm.
clock. You just play good hard nosed defense. You get the ball back with a chance to take the lead. I get it. You don't have to be as aggressive when it's only a one possession game and you even have a chance to. I mean, that's the only thing I could think of. Maybe he told him, like,
Mm.
really, really go for the ball. We're probably going to end up having to foul anyway. But I guess if you have that kind of mentality of you're down one and you're saying we're going to have to foul anyway,
Seemed
that's probably not a
intentional.
good mentality to have.
Yeah, seemed intentional, but either way, it didn't matter. Duke was going to beat Mississippi State anyway, so I guess it didn't really matter in the end. Greg, let's get to the next team there. Arizona's in the Sweet 16. Uh, Oregon was able to beat Liberty to start off this little pot of teams we're talking about. And then Arizona beat Akron. Akron was a team I think many people were looking for as possible upset pick, but Arizona plays the same way, and Arizona plays a lot better at playing the same way that Akron does. So Arizona gets that win. And then we have a classic Big 12 matchup, or Pac 12 matchup. Wow, I'm getting confused here. Pac 12 matchup that Bill Walton would have loved. Arizona is able to win this one 87 to 83. And Greg, we got good Caleb Love, 29 points. Something about the Pac 12 must be speaking to him. And he is able to lead his team to the Sweet 16. Now, they're a team that has been highly ranked. At different times, I think we've maybe doubted them, me in and out on them all year long, can't figure them out. Um, that's not a bad season considering everything Arizona's had going on, mostly with Caleb Love's inefficiency.
Yeah, has a moment with Jalen Rose, gets to dap him up on live TV for everybody to see. He looks. I wonder if someone can get his efficiency under control, but like he to me feels like he's going to be the prototypical NBA two guard coming up. Like, I don't know where he'll get drafted, if he'll get drafted, but I feel like he's going to make a roster just honestly out of the things he can do. Forget about the fact that sometimes obviously it's not that great. But maybe when he's only got basketball to concentrate on, when he's in the NBA, maybe it'll be different. Oregon, if you could freeze both of these games after the first 10 minutes, both their game against Liberty and Arizona, Oregon looks like a 5-4 team, man. They got off to two hot starts. I don't remember how bad it was against Liberty, but I know there was a point in this Oregon game where we were all like, it's done. It's over. Forget it. And obviously Arizona comes back and wins the game with this. This was the last game of the night last night. This gave us a little bit of, fun watching and drama. But Arizona's got a lot of talent. We've kind of walked the line of what we've thought of them for most of the year. Now, I guess I don't want to. I guess I can give you I'm picking Duke to beat them. They already beat them in Arizona earlier in the year. So I have no reason to think they're not going to win in a neutral when they're at full strength. Again, we don't want to spend 18 hours talking about this. So unless you got something else you want to add, that's where I'm at.
I wasn't going to pick the game. I was going to wait till after the region, like the other region. But Caleb Love does have the chance to do the funniest thing ever. Ended Coach K's career in the Final Four. Now he's at Arizona. Oh boy, if he beat this Duke team that everyone's expecting to go to the championship, no one's having those issues that everyone has about Auburn right now, and they're like, hey, Duke's definitely making it. Oh boy, funniest thing ever, Caleb Love. There's a lot of people who are praying for you to get the job done. All right, so let's go to the bottom half of this bracket. In the East, we have BYU in the Sweet 16. They were able to beat VCU, and they have played really good offense throughout this point, and they are on a tear. They're a hot team right now. Greg, more importantly, they beat Wisconsin in the second round. Wisconsin was able to beat Montana, nothing of note there. They won pretty easily. BYU beat Wisconsin, and they won 91 to 89. Richie Saunders had 25 points. There was an ejection that was kind of weak. That probably shouldn't be an ejection, but by letter of the law, the refs had to throw the kid out of the game. I believe it was Dawson Baker who got thrown out of the game. And John Tonje had 37 points. Wisconsin couldn't get a stop because BYU was so good. So, very good job for the Cougars to get to the Sweet 16. I thought Wisconsin would be able to handle them a little bit more defensively and would be able to outscore them at the very least. Not the case.
Yeah, the only other thing I want to add, Joe, is well, I guess two things. First, that last possession that Wisconsin had with a chance to tie or take the lead was abysmal. They don't even get. I guess you could call the thing they got a shot. It was completely contested. It was one of those where a pass went awry and then it's a loose ball and somebody's just got to get something up, but they were in the corner, so there's no space. You know, okay, it just unfortunate. BYU, man, outside of their loss in the Big 12 tournament, I believe has like won. I think it's like 11 of their last 12 or something like that. So I mean, we've seen this before where teams just get hot at the right time. This might be them. Obviously, they have NBA talent on their roster, and Igor Demon. They have, Richie Saunders is a veteran player. They have, I know he's a first year, but he's an former NBA coach, and they've got some ingredients. Who knows, man? This could just be that team that was okay for a lot of the season, and then late February, early March, they got hot, and we look up and oh man, they beat Alabama. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't think I have anything else to add to that. What are your thoughts?
No, they did a good job. Their offense is fun to watch. Igor Denham has been one of the, I wouldn't say like surprises, but like one of the bright spots on this team that I think has lifted them to this level. And, just a really good job to get them to the Sweet 16. Greg, let's get to the last team in this region, Sweet 16. Alabama is there. They beat Robert Morris in the first round. Now, there is some extra drama there. Robert Morris did play pretty well and had him on the ropes at different points in the second half. They pulled away at the very, very end. But Grant Nelson wasn't supposed to play. They put him in the lineup, at the end of the game. They put him in the game. Apparently, Grant Nelson said he wanted to play and help his team get the win. So he was not supposed to play in that first round matchup. He ended up playing. Um, they got the job done. They got the win. That's all that matters. They ended up playing St. Mary's in the second round, Greg. St. Mary's had an awesome comeback against Vanderbilt. It's hard to do for a team that plays at their pace, but they were able to get a win. So good for Tony Bennett there. Randy Bennett there, sorry. And then, Greg, I have nothing to say about this next game. Alabama beat St. Mary's. It was the worst basketball game I've seen all year. No one was hitting shots. It was awful. The pace was awful for St. Mary's, and they just couldn't keep up with Alabama. And Alabama missed all of their shots. So Alabama gets to the Sweet 16, but that was very lackluster in my mind.
Well, they also struggle with Bobby Moe, Robert Morris. So I mean, I've got him in my Final Four. Again, feeling kind of shaky about that right now. Even though obviously they're happy that Grant Nelson's injury isn't a long term kind of thing, he's able to at least play through it. When it initially happened, it was what going to get scans. We don't know what it's going to be like. Now they're sitting in the Sweet 16, but again, shaky. But this team was top 5 preseason and then wasn't exactly everything we thought they would be. They struggled at times. It seems like they've started to put some things together, but then again, they're not exactly, invincible. BYU's hot. This could be this is the recipe for our first. I don't even know if I want to call it shocker. But I mean, this is the recipe for our first, I guess giant upset of this March.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to say that the 10 beating the 2 that we're going to talk about here in the last region we're going to talk about is the biggest upset, then yeah, this could be. I'll wait for my pick here. Okay, so we both have Duke coming out of the top, and Greg, who do you have coming out of this matchup?
Here, since I picked this entire region correct in terms of Sweet 16, a little bit of a common thread here. We'll see. Hated my bracket. 4 out of 4 in this region for Sweet 16. Mm-hmm. I'll take Duke to beat Arizona, and if this was one of those situations, here's the thing: if I didn't have either of these teams in my bracket. Let's say I completely goofed the bottom pod and I had neither Sweet 16 team between BYU and Alabama. I'd probably be picking BYU just because of the role that they're on. And you know that happens this March, but I'm going to stick with my bracket and take Bama, meaning we get Duke, Bama, and then Bama to the Final Four. I don't like it, but I'm not going to pick against my bracket because I have money invested in that. So
I respect it, but we do have new information in front of you. So if you wanted to change your prediction
that's
here, I think that's fair to do.
I listen, man. I don't like to hedge all that much. I'm not going to hedge my bets. I'm just going
This
to go
isn't a
with what I
hedge.
got.
This isn't a hedge. This is just you predicting on a podcast what you think is going to happen. And if you want to stick with Alabama, you go right for it. But I did not have. So I thought Alabama would be out early, and I don't think I was so far off on that with how they played in the first two games. But different.
Just I in your bracket. I just want to. Did you have them losing to St. Mary's? Because I don't
Yeah.
think you
Uh
don't.
huh.
Okay, so you weren't picking.
I
I
was pick,
remember you didn't pick Vanderbilt. I couldn't remember what we said last.
Yeah, it was more of a pick against Alabama than it was pick for St. Mary's. I think I even said I would rather it be against a different 7 or 10 seed, but I just wasn't impressed with the style of play they have. Now, I will say, took Duke in the first one. I'm taking Alabama in the second one. BYU's defense is why they played pretty good defense in spurts in their first two games. I am concerned how they're going to do against Alabama and all of Alabama's athletes, especially if Grant Nelson another week to heal up. I will take Duke to go to the Final Four. I had Duke in my Final Four in my bracket, so I will stick with it as well. I was giving you the out because again, we do get new information, and I do think it's fair to say, hey, like if I did pick Auburn to the championship or excuse me to the Final Four, I'm still picking that. But if I said, hey, I didn't like how they looked, I'm going to take Michigan State. I wouldn't have a huge problem. Obviously, you can't go around saying, oh, I've called it in my bracket if you change your pick. But I don't know. Duke has done nothing to not done nothing to make me think anything poorly of them. I think if anything, they probably increased how I feel about them during this tournament, which makes it tougher when we get to the possible national champion that I had. So both have Duke coming out of this region. Greg, let's go to the next region. We are going to be doing the Midwest region. Now, interesting tidbit here Houston is the first Sweet 16 team we're going to be talking about. They will be not very happy to be in the Midwest because of all the other teams that are in this region still will have a much better chance to have fans travel to that game. But if you don't like it, win your games to get the top overall seed so you can pick where you are. So Houston wins their game against 16 seeds SIU Edwardsville. If you ever want a sure thing, pick Houston to cover in their first round game. They just belittle some of the smaller school teams they play, and they did so easily there. They played Gonzaga second round. Gonzaga demolished Georgia. Looked like that tournament team we've seen so many times before. And then Houston had control for most of the game against Gonzaga. Gonzaga comes back and makes it close at the end, Greg. Don't quite get over the hump. They had a chance at the end and don't get a shot off to maybe tie the game or even maybe push it to overtime and win. And they don't get that shut off, and that ends it for them. But good by Houston to have a pretty good defense against Gonzaga for most of the game, and don't let them get that shot off, and they get the chance to go to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, this is another, I guess, death of Cinderella narrative story. Gonzaga obviously is something holistically different as a program, but still, we end up with a Sweet 16 with all Power 5, Power 4, whatever you want to talk about schools. Gonzaga's Sweet 16 streak ends at 9.
Mhm.
I crunched some numbers today, Joe. I don't think I'm sure this is, I haven't seen it on Twitter. Maybe you did. But I'm sure someone has already mentioned this somewhere. So if you know the answer to this trivia question, I guess props to you. Do you know who currently holds the Sweet 16 streak active?
Houston.
It is Houston. You know how many years it is?
No,
It is
I do not know that.
6, which is crazy to think. Gonzaga, a little school from the WCC, ends up 9 straight Sweet 16s, and the next school is a school that was honestly, floundering. Obviously there's, we're great in the 80s and whatnot, but in the American, not doing great. And then they hire Kelvin Sampson, and he turns the whole thing around for them. They've been to a Final Four with them. Chance to maybe make another Elite Eight, Final Four, maybe even a national title if things break their way. We'll just have to see. So I don't think I have, about the actual games themselves, I don't think I have anything other than what you already said.
No, I mean, mostly just to recap there, but I think Houston looks pretty dominating right now. Let's move on to the next little portion, Greg, because we do have a time crunch here for both of our schedules. But we have Purdue is who they'll be playing. So again, location is good for them. Purdue looked pretty good against High Point. High Point had a chance, and they kept on making dumb offensive decisions, whether it was shots or turnovers. So Purdue gets a win. Braden Smith deserves a lot of props for that. He controlled the pace. And then they ended up playing McNeese because McNeese beat Clemson. And Greg, it wasn't like there was some all-time shooting performance. McNeese dominated in the paint. They had more energy. Clemson looked like the nervous team, and that's weird for a team that had just gone on a run last year in last year's tournament. But then McNeese's story dies. Purdue beats them and beats them pretty easily in the next game. You know, Amir Khan got a lot of love in this tournament. I'm kind of glad he's out of it now so we can focus on basketball. But it was a good run for McNeese to get that one win. And then Purdue, I think would just say, like, I'm not overly impressed with them, but they're just kind of steadily taking care of business. And they got some guys to contribute that haven't contributed in the last portion of the season. So I'm excited for them to see what they can do against Houston.
And Joe, I remember talking about Purdue at points in the season, and we just said, man, they got to get something from somewhere else. And Camden Heidi has stepped up a little bit. I don't know about how much that's going to help them with Houston. I think Houston's a whole other animal, but it did get them back to the Sweet 16. That's an accomplishment in and of itself. And I think it does put them in a better position to play against Houston than they otherwise would have. Braden Smith can't turn the ball over that much against Houston, though. That defense, yikes. If you turn the ball over against them, which, obviously as much as they like to pressure them, that's going to be a bad recipe. So he's going to have to reel that in if they want to have a shot at beating Houston.
Definitely they'll have to do that. We'll get to that preview here in a second, Greg. Let's go to the bottom half of this bracket. We have Illinois beating Xavier. They shot the absolute piss out of the ball. We'll just say piss out of the ball. I know people won't be happy with that. That Greg will hear from about that, but that's all right. They shot the piss out of the ball. They win that game. Xavier again, maybe some ulterior motives from the coach. He already got the new Texas job, so that's a conspiracy theory out there. Kentucky ends up beating Troy. I was on the edge of my seat, but Troy realistically didn't get that close. And then Kentucky and Illinois. Just a masterful offensive performance by Kentucky, to be honest. Illinois shot the ball pretty well, but Kobe Brea had some big moments. And Greg, I think it has to be said that was the best defensive game that Kentucky.
I was wondering how long it was going to take you to get to the Kentucky defense.
Oh, I mean,
I can't believe you mentioned it last. Man, this is what we were looking for with this team, man. Now they're a threat, and it stinks that they don't have Jackson Robinson, and it may end up being a what if type question. Made the Sweet 16, for the first time since what? I guess I should know it since I ran the numbers today. First time since
2018,
2019.
2019, yeah.
According to Greg's unofficial research that he put together on a spreadsheet. So I mean, look, it's hard to beat a team 3 times. I don't know if they're going to do it. We'll just have to see. But only other thing I want to add for the Xavier Illinois game is guarding the pick and pop threat's probably a good idea when a team's hitting threes. I would advise guarding the guy that's hitting the jump shots.
Yeah, Kentucky's defensive efficiency is all the way up to 45th in the country now, which is crazy to say. The first, I mean, if you're thinking about drafting Kasparas, I mean, I like him a lot, but that was a lot of turnovers to start the game, and it's not like this Kentucky defense is great. So something to watch out for as we get ready for draft prep as well. But the best defensive performance Kentucky's had, and in a game where Illinois still shot the ball pretty decently, at least by their standards, that is something to note. All right, bottom half of the bracket, Greg, or the bottom part of the bracket, Greg, we have UCLA beating Utah State in a blowout, and then we have Tennessee beating Wofford, Tennessee beating UCLA. To be honest, there wasn't a lot of note from this region, from this little portion of the bracket. UTLA, Mick Cronin gets knocked out of the tournament and has one of the biggest loser interviews of all time. Of coach, the media asking about next year. He's like, "I'm just worried if they got me food. To be honest, don't ask the question you're going to ask." It was, look at the transcript. It is exactly Mick Cronin, exactly what you'd expect. But Tennessee gets to the Sweet 16, and another solid year for Rick Barnes. Let's see if he can push it further this time.
Yeah, I wonder if Texas misses Rick Barnes, man. That was the thing I kept
Mm,
thinking when I was looking at this Tennessee team and what they've been able to do, and obviously they're on their umpteenth coach since he's been gone, and Tennessee's done some really great things. I, there's not a lot to talk about from this pod, so I think we could just get to picks.
let's do it. You're up first.
Let's see. Let's see. I just want to let's see. Oh yes, 3 out of 4 Sweet 16 teams in this region. Even though I hated my bracket, I am still gonna go with Houston over Purdue, which I is what I have in my bracket. I am decidedly less. I thought this would be a slam dunk for Tennessee. You're not going to beat a team 3 times, you know, but this Kentucky team is different. I'm still going to go with what I got in my bracket, but this is a different look Kentucky team than we would have looked at 3-4 weeks ago. Definitely a different look Kentucky team than, when I was picking my bracket. I'm still going to go with Tennessee. I think they get the job done. That gives us Tennessee, Houston, and I picked Tennessee to go to my Final Four from there.
All right, I'm going Houston to beat Purdue. I did not have Purdue in that game. I do think Houston will make the Elite Eight. Just their pressure and defense is, if anything, history taught us anything, this Purdue's guards will struggle with that, and I think that'll be the game changer right there. So Houston gets by. Greg, I looked up stats on Twitter, so this is probably not true, but college basketball teams who face a team for a third time, if they've won the first two, they win 72% of the time in the third matchup.
Really?
So we'll have to double check that this week. But that's on Twitter. I could be totally wrong. Uh, I don't think it's the same as football, to be honest. I really don't. So
And honestly, Joe, that's where I'm drawing that from. Like, I just assume it's the same across sports. So I guess that's my fault for making that
well,
assumption. But
here we go. So I'm going Kentucky to win this game, and I think it comes down to more about Tennessee than Kentucky. Tennessee struggles when they play some of these good offensive teams. That's what we saw them go on those SEC kind of like I guess those struggles in the SEC play was against some of the better offensive teams, not necessarily defensive teams, because they want to drag you into a dogfight where they're physical and everything. They're playing this one at Lucas Oil Stadium. Sightlines will be different. You have to have Chaz Lanier play good. If you do not, they're going to lose. And if he doesn't play well, Jordan Gainey has to do double time to make up for Chaz Lanier. I don't know if that's going to be the case here in this game. So I'm going to go Kentucky to win this one. It's going to be a interesting matchup, and Tennessee fans have said this is their worst nightmare. This week is their worst week of their life, waiting for this game because it would be all crashing down if Kentucky beats them in the Sweet 16. So I'm going to go Houston to beat Kentucky, though. That physicality and defense is very good. We've seen some of their injuries don't seem like they're as big of a deal. So I'm going to go Houston to make the Final Four out of that region.
I'll just say this, Joe. I wouldn't be mad if my bracket was wrong and we got to see Houston, Kentucky. I think that'd be a really fun game to watch.
That offense defense would be fun. It's already good that we're seeing Kentucky, Tennessee. That's been some fun matchups already this year. Greg, we have to do the last region pretty quickly, but we'll get it done. We have Florida beating Norfolk State. Norfolk State had some pretty good minutes in the middle 20, I would say. But Florida gets the win there. And then we have UConn beating Oklahoma. Oklahoma had a chance down the stretch, but really, Jeremiah Fears was kind of all they had, and that's why they ended up where they did. And UConn played Florida. Greg, there's some extra storylines that we have to get to as well here, which makes it tough. Florida was down; they're able to come back, get the win there. Walter Clayton hit some big shots down the stretch. UConn almost comes back after that, but they do not. They win. Florida wins 77-75. They were tested by the defending back-to-back national champions. Dan Hurley leaves the game and says, "I hope they don't screw you like they screwed us, Baylor, like all that stuff." Um, what a sore loser! What a crybaby! Good for the sport, though.
Yeah, I really hate it that this was one of, I think, I don't know, the 2 or 3 most exhilarating games that we got in the tournament with, I know it didn't finish at the buzzer, but some of those shots that had to be made for Florida to get back in the game and then to extend the lead, there was 2 specific Walter Clayton threes that were just ridiculous. This game was a lot of fun. It stinks that we're going to talk about the off the court stuff, but I think at this point that's kind of par for the course when you're talking Dan Hurley, Mick Cronin, and a few select others. Like we're going to end up, yes, talking about the on the court stuff, but honestly, the off the court stuff carries a similar amount of weight. So, Florida moves on. I am still in love. more in love with your national title pick than I was. They did get obviously more tested than I thought they would, but we know UConn's been really good at times this year, and Florida got them on an up day. So wouldn't surprise me if we go to the next game and they dispatch easily Maryland.
Could definitely see that. UConn did play their best defensive game of the season by far too, and Florida earned the right to be in the Sweet 16. They faced that battle and won. Greg, the next little portion we have Maryland coming out of there. Maryland was able to beat Grand Canyon. Their next matchup was against Colorado State. Colorado State had defeated Memphis. It was a game where we talked about Tyrese Hunter was out. Dane Danger was a guy they went to over and over again to try to exploit their size. And he did pretty well in that game, but Colorado State was able to shoot some threes and really get that win. And then they go to this game, Maryland and Colorado State, one of the best games of the tournament so far. Colorado State has a fantastic a game all the way through, keeps up with them, winning at some points. They give the ball to Denis Clifford, their best player. He finds an open 3-point shooter. I believe it was Evans to hit the go ahead shot with like 5 or 6 seconds left. Maryland pushes it in the front court, calls timeout. Kevin Willard asks, "Who wants the ball?" And Derek Queen, the freshman, says, "Give me the MF and ball." Despite never hitting a game winner in his life, he gets the ball and takes a dribble or two and then hits the ball off the glass and hits the game winner. Questions about traveling. I don't care. I don't think anyone should care, to be honest. They're never going to call that in this situation. We've been asking for a buzzer beater the whole time. We got a buzzer beater. Maryland wins. Sucks for the Cinderella minded Colorado State, but good win for Maryland, and the Crab Five dances on.
Yeah, that was our moment for the tournament. We had some other, exhilarating, exciting, fun games, but this was it. Obviously, all the conversation after turned to did he travel, did he not? And you had people coming out defiantly. He absolutely did travel. And then Gene Steratore gets on and talks about how you could interpret it as not a travel. Maybe this just files under it's so cool it counts. I don't know. At the end of the day, the scorebook says 72-71. You can't you can absolutely be upset if you're a Colorado State fan, but like you had 40 minutes to get it done. So, that's something I always remember leaving basketball games. Dad's, I make a stupid play here or there. Dad's like, yeah, but there were 3,000 other plays in that game. You can't, if you got it done somewhere else, it's not a 1-point game, and that shot, doesn't happen. So good for Maryland, good for the Crab Five, good for them getting to the Sweet 16. For the first time, and you know what? I know we got to go. I'm not going to scroll through my data, but I know it's been a minute since they've been to the Sweet 16.
Second time since 2002. I know that stat, but we'll keep it moving, Greg. We have Drake beating Missouri. That was a game where they controlled the pace the whole time. Missouri could not keep up, could not break it down. Bad end for Dennis Gates' Missouri Tigers, but Drake gets the win there. We have Texas Tech beating UNC Wilmington, and then Texas Tech kind of dominating the game against Drake, controlling the pace and getting out to a hot start and just kind of keeping that up. A lot of props to JT Toppin, and they get the job done to get to the Sweet 16. Very impressive weekend by Texas Tech.
Texas Tech getting the job done without I almost called him CJ McCollum, which is not right. I am blanking on names today, man. I don't know what it is. You're gonna have to give it to me now.
Nope, never.
Okay. Without their best 3-point shooter,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it'll come to my mind eventually. Props to Drake. I had that was one of the upsets I had. Missouri's that offense is great, and then they get into a game where a team that really likes to slow down the pace got them out of their rhythm, and there you go. There's an upset for Drake. I don't have much to say about Texas Tech Drake. I think Texas Tech might be set up for an Elite Eight appearance, but maybe you think differently. I know we're on a time crunch. I don't have much else to add.
No, I think they are as well. Are you thinking of Chance McMillan, their best 3-point shooter?
That's who I'm thinking of.
Okay.
I almost said CJ McCollum, which I knew is not right. But yes, that's who I'm thinking of.
All right, so getting to the bottom, the last sports we're going to talk about in recap form. Arkansas beats Kansas in a battle of some of the Hall of Fame coaches. Arkansas looks pretty good in this one. Boogie Fland comes back and everything. They do get stifled by a little bit of 2-3 zone. Bill Self after the game says he's already been thinking about next year, but Arkansas gets that win. And then St. John's beats Omaha. Arkansas then goes on to beat St. John's, Greg. There's some extra storylines here, too. RJ Lewis comes out of the game at the end of the game, but he had, I think, 3 of 17. So that makes it easy. And Rick Pitino answered, like, hey, basically, this is what happens. So this is the reason why they lost the game is they just couldn't shoot the ball, and Arkansas could.
Yeah, you want to talk about storylines, buddy? How about where Cal was last year, and then he beats Bill Self and Rick Pitino in his first 2 tournament games this year? I mean, that's just what this month brings us. They were 0-5 in SEC play to start the year. Now they're in the Sweet 16 after beating 2 Hall of Fame coaches. It's just I don't even know what to do. This is one of the, obviously Arkansas is one of the, I got 13 out of 16 Sweet 16 teams right. Arkansas was one I got wrong. You know, I guess this is the closest thing to a Sweet 16 Cinderella that we have, but feels really weird calling a power conference team anything like that.
Definitely. Arkansas, BYU, and UK, that little triangle of coaches, all make the Sweet 16. Kentucky's the first team to make the Sweet 16 with returning 0% of their scoring from last year. Greg, I have to leave in a couple minutes here, so we got to pick this region really quickly. Who are you going with?
Florida has depth. Maryland doesn't. I think it's Florida. That's where I'm leaning with that one. I like Texas Tech to beat Arkansas. I like Florida beat Texas Tech, but I think that game might be more of a test. They have some real good weapons. We'll have to see if Chance McMillan is healthy or not. And that I think that may be honestly the difference in what kind of game we see in the Elite Eight there.
Yeah, sticking with my national champions out of this region. I think Florida can do more than Maryland can. Foul trouble can get Maryland in the way. Florida can get to the Elite Eight. Texas Tech was in my bracket as well. Big fan of them all year. I like their offense. I like JT Toppin and the shooters surrounding them. But I do think Florida will be too much. It will make the Final Four, and I'll stick with them to be my national champion as well. I just really like the makeup of this team. Greg, any final thoughts for the week?
I think we covered it. I think we had a longer show than we thought we would.
Mm-hmm.
Joe's got recreational activities to get to. I think we cap it.
Oh boy, people are gonna take that the wrong way. It is rec volleyball, beach volleyball. I'm getting to, but we did get to everything we needed to. Remind everyone to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We will be back next week to recap the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight and preview the Final Four and National Championship game. And then we will also talk about any more coaching changes. For now, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.